where people are trying to resolve a mystery. Just where is Qin Gang, China's foreign minister? That is the question currently exercising the minds of Chinese citizens as well as foreign affairs observers. That's because Gang has not been seen in public for 3 weeks now. The absence of China's foreign minister from public view has triggered widespread speculation, with many posting comments and theories online about what may have happened to him. Of course, unsurprisingly, in China, much of that discourse seems to have been censored. What makes Qin Gang conspicuous by his absence is the fact that he was missing from a whole host of recent high-profile diplomatic efforts by Beijing to repair ties with the United States. As a former ambassador to Washington and widely seen as a protege of Chinese President Xi Jinping, Qin Gang was expected to play a key role in the string of high-level visits by US officials. Curiously, his last public appearance was during meetings with his Sri Lankan counterpart and officials from Vietnam and Russia in Beijing on the 25th of June, in the immediate aftermath of the uprising by the Wagner mercenary group in Russia. Subsequently, Qin did not join Chinese officials during talks with the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in early July, nor was he part of the visit by US climate envoy John Kerry. All high-level contacts between the US and China had been suspended for nearly a year after US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August last year. That meant that these recent trips by top US officials marked a significant thaw in bilateral ties and were therefore quite critical. In early July, Chinese officials also cancelled a planned visit by European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell without citing a reason for the change of plans. Last week, Qin was replaced as head of Beijing's delegation to the ASEAN summit in Indonesia. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that Qin would not go due to health reasons, but offered no details. Now, a week later, Qin Gang has still not resurfaced, and in a suspicious move, discussion about his absence appears to have been censored on the Chinese social media site Weibo, with a search for "Where is Qin Gang?" on the platform, returning the message, "No results." Though one Chinese netizen wrote, "The Foreign Affairs Ministry's press conference was silent about old Qin's whereabouts except for health factors, which inevitably makes people suspicious." Some others on the social media circulated different kinds of theories while speculating about his absence. What's more, journalist Phil Cunningham said that 5 sentences about Qin Gang were cut without notice from a piece he wrote about US-China relations for the pro-Beijing Hong Kong paper, the South China Morning Post. The paragraphs pointed out that it was an unfortunate time for a former ambassador to Washington to disappear from the political scene, and questioned whether it was due to illness or political disfavor. Cunningham wrote on Twitter, "Qin Gang is missing. Not only is he missing from the news cycle in China, but he is also missing from my article." As run by the SCMP on the 15th of July, 5 sentences about Qin were removed without notice from the article after it was accepted for publication. Now, 57-year-old Qin Gang rose to prominence as one of the aggressive wolf warriors who brought a new antagonistic style to Chinese diplomacy in recent years. Reportedly backed and promoted by President Xi himself, Gang took over as the Chinese foreign minister last December and was tipped to take over in the future from Wang Yi as the top foreign affairs official in the Chinese Communist Party. As foreign minister, Qin strongly criticized Washington after bilateral relations reached a new low following the downing of a suspected Chinese spy balloon in the US. Qin also played a significant role in subsequent efforts by the two countries to stabilize relations and restore communication, including a meeting with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken during his visit to Beijing just last month. Let's clarify that in China, the foreign minister is not the top authority on foreign affairs. Instead, it is the office of the Communist Party of China's Central Commission for Foreign Affairs, which is currently headed by Wang Yi. China's notoriously opaque political system means that it can be tough to fathom the cause of sudden disappearances by senior officials. These are sometimes a warning sign that a former power broker has fallen out of political favor and their next public appearance may actually be in court. Could that be in store for Qin Gang? Such sudden disappearances have become a common feature in Chinese leader Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign. Of course, there are those who would remind you that President Xi Jinping himself vanished from public view for 2 weeks shortly before being appointed China's top leader back in 2012 before reappearing to take up the post. No reason has ever been given for that brief absence. However, theories around Qin Gang's appearance continue to swirl around relentlessly not only in China but internationally. Alright, let's now turn our attention to the one story that has been grabbing headlines globally, and it is certainly not for good reasons. The blistering heat waves currently sweeping through large parts of the world, especially Europe and the United States, are not only breaking heat records, but also come as a terrifying reminder of how climate change is wreaking havoc across our planet. Now, the first week of July was the hottest week ever on record. High temperatures hit 52.2 degrees Celsius on Sunday in northwest China, while in the US, California's Death Valley reached nearly 52 degrees Celsius on Sunday. In the United States, millions of people in the southwest and south face dangerously high temperatures. Some places like Texas and Arizona have endured a week-long heat streak. The heat has primed the land for fires in places like Spain and Greece. In Greece, where temperatures have risen above 40 degrees Celsius, authorities were forced to close the Acropolis in Athens from noon to 5 p.m. local time. More than 500 firefighters are trying to control 4 major wildfires in Greece. Smoke from wildfires in Canada is triggering unhealthy air warnings across the northern tier of the US. Iran's Persian Gulf International Airport experienced record-breaking heat on Sunday due to a rare combination of extremely high temperature and abundant atmospheric moisture that created a heat index. The Iran airport reported a heat index of 152 degrees Fahrenheit or 66.7 degrees Celsius. Conditions considered to be intolerable for human as well as animal life. Heat index combines air temperature and humidity. And this shocking temperature was seen in Iran after searing inland heat clashed with humid air flowing off the very warm waters of the Persian Gulf. Meanwhile, torrential rains have inundated parts of Japan, China, South Korea and India, upending the lives of millions and causing flash floods, landslides and power cuts. Scorching and record-breaking heat is expected to continue across large parts of southern Europe as the continent braces for its second extreme heat wave, putting people's health at risk, setting the stage for wildfires. Last week's surpasses heat wave is making way for another, which Italian weather forecasters have named Charon, the ferryman in Greek mythology who carries souls to the underworld. Italy, Spain and Greece have already faced unrelenting heat for days, but the European Space Agency has warned that the heat wave is only just beginning. In Italy, which has been hit particularly hard, temperatures in many cities are expected to soar well above 40 degrees Celsius. Heat waves are suffocating the US, much of Europe, parts of Asia, while El Nino intensifies in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic waters of Florida hit an unprecedented 32.3 degrees Celsius. China has already recorded its highest ever temperature of 52.2 degrees Celsius in Sanbo Township. Dr. Akshay Deoras from the University of Reading's Meteorology Department has warned of more frequent and intense extreme weather events if global temperatures continue to rise at their current rate. He says, Earth will become an inferno if the heat waves do not spur governments on to tackle global warming. The Earth's climate is undergoing unprecedented shifts, primarily caused by human activities, particularly the release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, industrial processes and agricultural practices have all contributed to the accumulation of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, creating a greenhouse effect that traps heat within the Earth's atmosphere. As a result, the planet's average temperature has been steadily climbing over the past century. Extreme heat is among the deadliest weather phenomena in the world. It can have devastating impact on humans. It leads to dehydration, and if a person doesn't drink enough water to replace the water lost through sweating and urination, the blood starts to thicken, making it more prone to clotting, which increases the risk of heart attack and stroke. Exposure to high temperature can also amplify existing health problems, making older people and those with chronic conditions particularly vulnerable. As the human-caused climate crisis accelerates, scientists are clear that extreme weather events such as heat waves will only become more frequent and more intense. Global temperatures have already risen 1.2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels due to human burning planet-heating fossil fuels.
I feel like every time we're visiting somewhere and there seems to be like a heat wave or like a rare weather disaster, it's kind of becoming the new like normal, and I'm very concerned about that. And I think it's a big shame because this is a really beautiful city. We want to be out as much as possible, but with it being as hot as it is, I feel like we have to be really mindful of that and staying inside as much as we can. But definitely climate change is a big concern.
Yeah, just walking around is exhausting because we're sweating without doing anything. And I feel like people here tolerate the heat way better than we as Europeans do, because we're used to maybe lower temperatures in summer.
I'm new to Texas, so this is super new to me. I'm from Michigan, so it is not this hot ever. Never sure if I'm sweating or if I'm just hot.
With Houston weather, especially the summertime, it's highly unpredictable, especially with the global warming and all that stuff. It's hotter and hotter every summertime.
It is oppressive. It's been very hot this week. We were not prepared. Happy that our Airbnb has a pool.
Let's now turn our attention to Africa. A big story in Kenya that has been making headlines, and it will make you wonder how the authorities looked the other way for so long. A bizarre and truly tragic story in Kenya keeps getting worse. The death count in an ongoing police investigation linked to a Kenyan cult that practiced starvation to meet Jesus Christ has exceeded 400 after 12 more bodies were found on Monday. This after the latest round of exhumations in the Shakahola forest, where cult leader Paul Nthenge Mackenzie allegedly urged followers to starve themselves to death. Investigators continue to search for more graves in the forest, where the first victims, some dead, others alive but weakened and emaciated, were discovered on the 13th of April. According to government autopsies, starvation appears to have been the main cause of death, although some victims, including children, were strangled, beaten or suffocated. Mackenzie, a former taxi driver turned preacher, has been in police custody since the middle of April. Now, on the 3rd of July, a court extended his detention by a month pending investigations. State prosecutors have said he is facing terrorism and genocide-related charges. The self-proclaimed pastor and father of 7 set up the Good News International Church back in 2003. Questions have been raised about how he managed to evade law enforcement despite a history of extremism and previous legal cases. It has also drawn President William Ruto to weigh in on the sensitive subject of Kenya's homegrown religious movements and failed efforts to regulate unscrupulous churches and cults, many of which have engaged in criminality. There are more than 4,000 churches registered in the East African country of around 50 million people. Mackenzie fell foul of the law in 2017 after he was accused of urging children not to attend school, claiming the Bible did not recognize education. He was arrested again in March after 2 children starved to death in the custody of their parents, but he was subsequently freed on bail. Following the discovery of these mass graves near the Indian Ocean town of Malindi, Mackenzie, his wife and 16 others were taken into custody. The 16 men are accused of operating an armed enforcer gang tasked with ensuring that no one broke their fast or left their forest hideout alive. These men are now in jail. Mackenzie's wife, who was held for 62 days, was released earlier this month on bond. Last month, 65 of his followers were rescued and charged with attempted suicide after they refused to eat, drawing condemnation from rights groups. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights said the move was inappropriate and would traumatize the survivors at a time when they most desperately require empathy. The Interior Minister last week accused the police of laxity in investigating the initial reports of starvation in the forest. He also laid blame on the judiciary for their handling of earlier cases involving Mackenzie, saying that prosecutors should have ensured he remained in jail. The Kenyan Interior Minister said the Shakahola massacre is the worst breach of security in the history of our country. He vowed to relentlessly push for legal reforms to tame rogue preachers. Well, quite a horrifying story that, as more and more dead bodies continue to surface, more than 400 have been exhumed so far. A cult that encouraged people to starve themselves to death to meet Jesus Christ. And they managed to do this right under the nose of the administration and law enforcement agencies. Well, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. If you have been, thanks so much for watching. Do join us again tomorrow at the same time.
मैं इमरान अहमद खान नियाजी सबके दिल से हल्फ उठाता हूँ।
When Imran Khan came